Awesome, awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Audialice, and I am an Ocean Uprise volunteer. I support our site and content writing. I'm also a very proud First Nation Caribeña, so Caribbean folks, welcome my brothers and sisters. With that, we also want to acknowledge today as National Day of Remembrance, also observed as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, for the North American Indian boarding schools. With all of the atrocities that occurred in Indian boarding schools and the countless acts of assimilation, we mindfully want to reflect on the 6,509 Indigenous children who have been unearthed from mass burial graves. This is really a time to remember the thousands more who have yet to be found and honor those who have survived. So we want to thank you in advance for your mindful consideration. And also want to thank you once again for joining us for our session here today. Just to give you a quick breakdown of today's session, first, I'll quickly go through some community guidelines for this talk, and then I'll give you some background on Parley for the Oceans and Ocean Uprise. And then we'll finally embark on our speakers' storytelling session. After the presentations, we'll have the opportunity to share ideas and ask questions, leave a constructive call to action, which I'm sure you guys are very, very eager about. So about these quick rules, we are in a safe and collaborative space. So we value diversity and we welcome all perspectives. In that regard, for the purposes of this call, we need you to respect yourself and each other in this creative community by being thoughtful and allowing others to speak as well. Remember to agree with care and disagree with respect, we ask of you. And then lastly, we will be recording the session for Ocean Uprise purposes. So feel free to turn off your camera if you don't feel comfortable with that. But we hope you do, because we love to see your smiling faces. And then secondly, moving forward, Parley for the Oceans is a collaboration network where creators, thinkers, and leaders come together to raise awareness for the beauty and fragility of our oceans, to develop and implement strategies that can really end the destruction. And then a big step Parley is taking to protect our oceans is to educate, inspire, and empower a new generation of ocean guardians. And this is why Ocean Uprise was born. So Ocean Uprise is a Parley initiative by youth for the youth. It's a space where passionate young leaders like our speakers today from around the world come together to learn, collaborate on innovative solutions, and work towards positive outcomes for the oceans. So now that we've got all of that covered, I'm super, 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 super excited to introduce you our incredible speakers for today. So along with her sister, Ella, Amy co-founded an award-winning campaign, which is now a charity, and it's called Kids Against Plastic. They work tirelessly to raise awareness of the negative effects of petroleum plastic on the environment. And she has educated young people and diplomats alike at the UN headquarters in Geneva, the Parliament in the UK, and at a TED Talk in 2018. She's helped over 1,100 schools and businesses become plastic clever and has collected over 96,000 pieces of plastic litter. Give it up for Amy, welcome. And thank you, everyone. And Michelle is a 16-year-old ocean hero, Conrad Challenge innovator and Technovation regional winner from Kisumu, Kenya, who's passionate about helping developing countries grow their economies without obliterating their natural resources. She and her brother Jeremy started Osiepe Sango, Friends of Lake Victoria. That's an organization working towards restoring Lake Victoria to its pristine natural condition. And they are now building an app to collect data on plastic pollution. So another round of applause for Michelle. And Charlotte, so beyond being a passionate diver and conservationist, Charlotte is the founder of Project 60 Seconds for the Oceans on Instagram, an account that features short interviews with world-leading conservationists, such as marine biologists and other ocean conservationists, As an enthusiastic supporter of SDG 14, she's continuing to pursue her passion for the oceans as she studies marine and coastal sciences at UC Davis. Another round for Charlotte. So now we can finally start with our session. Amy, I'd love to pass it over to you. Please share your experience and the lessons you've learned throughout your career with the youth.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So fingers crossed this is working for everyone, hopefully, anyway. Hi everyone, so my name is Amy, I'm 18 years old and I am the co-founder of an environmental charity called Kids Against Plastic, which I've been running since 2016 with my younger sister Ella. Firstly, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today and to be part of this really inspiring event. And I'm literally so excited to be here and to be meeting you all virtually. So I'm from Nottingham in England, and I think as anyone who has been to Nottingham knows, I'm pretty much probably about the furthest that you can get from a coastline than any other place in Britain. But despite this, I would say I'm an oceans advocate because whilst the ocean isn't something that I'm lucky enough to experience regularly, it's something that I know has a really big significance and importance. And as you'll know, the vital role that the oceans play in the climate and in climate change, and therefore their importance to all life on Earth. And it's because of this that I'm someone who is passionate about protecting our oceans and the ecosystems within them. But more importantly, I feel really empowered by the belief that I can actually do my bit to help protect them and that I can make a difference and that I can try and be a change maker. But I guess where does this belief come from is what I want to try and tap into today. And I think all waves of change start from small ripples, excuse the pun. And for me, they were some really inspiring young female activists that definitely started the ripple that has inspired and empowered me and my sister. And so the person that first introduced my sister and I to the plastic problem and has led us to create our own waves of change was someone called Penn. Now, Emily is an oceans advocate and she's a skipper and she's actually an ambassador for Parley's for the Ocean. And when I first met her back in 2015, we were watching a presentation that she was doing about the problem of plastic pollution. And she really opened our eyes to the scale of this issue. And Emily has been a great support to us over the years, and she's just a constant ongoing source of inspiration for us. Now, fast forward not too much later, we came across this TED Talk, which was by the sisters Melati and Isabel, who are the founders of Bioplastic Bags. And the chances are you might well have come across their campaign before. It's since succeeded in getting the Bali government to ban plastic bags on the island. And as two young girls who'd discovered plastic pollution and were shocked and really saddened by its impacts, my sister and I were just in awe of these two sisters who'd managed to make such a huge positive difference. And to top it all off, they were 12 and 10 when they first started their campaign, which was the ages that we were when we were sat watching their TED Talk. And so for us, seeing people our age go on to make such a large change, despite of, and maybe even because of their age, was really the spark that we needed to get started in taking actions ourselves. And so in the 5.5 years since this time, that's exactly what we've been trying to do. And we've been campaigning as part of our charity Kids Against Plastic to not only raise awareness of the issue of plastic pollution, but importantly, try and show everyone what they can do to make a change to address it. Now, we started off by just litter picking. So I think this photo is actually from the very day that we watched the Bioplastic Bags TED Talk. And then we went marching out with bin bags. We didn't even have litter pickers at this point to really start trying to make a difference on the ground in our local area. And at this time, we set ourselves this goal to pick up 100,000 pieces of plastic litter, which is one for every sea mammal allegedly killed by plastic in the oceans every year. And we started litter picking regularly to reach it. And it's something that's really continued to this day, over 96,000 pieces later. But litter picking really opened our eyes to humans' consumption of plastic in particular, because as I'm sure you'll know if you've done your own litter picks yourself, we'd return to a place that we'd been just maybe a week later, and the litter that we picked up would already have been replaced. And so clearly to us, picking up plastic is not the solution to the plastic problem, at least until we collectively cut down our consumption of plastic to begin with. I mean, like, if you think about it, if you had an overflowing bathtub, you wouldn't try and mop up all the spilling water as it flowed over the edges. The logical thing would be to turn off the tap. And really, that's exactly what we need to do with plastic. We need to cut our plastic consumption at the source and turn off this plastic tap. And so began, I guess, Kids Against Plastic as it is today, with our different initiatives to raise awareness of plastic pollution and encourage a more discerning use of single-use plastic. One of our main focuses is our Plastic Clever scheme, the idea of which is to encourage people to be more discerning users of single-use plastic and stop buying and using their top 4 single-use plastic items. A lot of single-use plastics tend to be used daily, mostly really without a second thought, and yet can actually be so simple for most of us to avoid just through the use of reusable alternatives or saying something as simple as "no bag, please." And the idea of Plastic Clever is that it's really simple, it's really achievable, and it's applicable to pretty much all sectors, be it schools, cafes, festivals, businesses. Schools in particular have been a major focus for us at the moment, not only because they tend to be hotspots of avoidable single-use plastics, but also because they're an incredibly effective way to try and reach young people and inspire them to take action against plastic pollution from a young age. Because after all, the younger that we learn about how incredible our oceans and our environment are, the younger that we start to care about them and grow up as the sustainable consumers of the future. And so far, we have over 1,100 schools signed up to become Plastic Clever so far around the UK. And we're not only continuing to grow this around the UK, but also abroad, which is super, super exciting for us. And finally, of course, outreach is a really important part of our charity, one that's become much more virtual in recent times, but which has allowed us the opportunities we could literally never have imagined when we just sat at our kitchen table with a passion to make a difference 5 years ago. And it's even allowed us to be back in the situation that first inspired us to get started, which was doing a TEDx talk in 2018. And I mentioned this just really to show how cyclical these ripples of change can be, because we started off as, and still completely are, ordinary kids. And so if we can be in the situation that first inspired us to make a difference and run a campaign, then so can literally any other young person. Sometimes all we need is just a bit of support and a spark to show us that we have the power inside all of us to be the change that we want to see in the world, and the way to really just grow from there. And that's something that's really incredibly important to me and Ella. I mean, young people are at the heart of our charity. It's kind of in the name after all, Kids Against Plastic. And that's why the last branch of our charity, the Kids Against Plastic Club, is probably the most important part of it. And so I thought I'd finish by sharing with you some of the ripples of change that are growing day by day from 3 incredible young women who are part of our Kids Against Plastic Club. So here they are. First up is Sky. Now, Sky is only 11 years old, but she's already started a campaign of her own aimed at no small target, but at the publishers and supermarkets here in the UK. So she started a petition to get comic and magazine publishers to stop selling plastic toys on the front of their magazines. And this petition's already had over 65,000 signatures since she started it this year. And she's spoken on the radio about it, been featured in the newspaper, and has been in contact already with some of the major supermarket chains in the UK to discuss with them stop selling plastic toys. One chain, Waitrose, has already agreed and gave magazines 8 weeks to get rid of plastic toys that they sold. So Sky is really the perfect example that age is just a number and there's not a barrier for taking action at all. Inaya is another club member. She's probably the most passionate person I have ever met, young or old. And since joining our club in early 2021, she's given presentations to it. She's met with her local MP. She's appeared on TV to talk about litter picking. And she even hosts her own radio segment for young people, which I just think is super cool. And I can't keep up with enough ideas for action and workshops for her to take part in. She's that motivated. And finally, we have Ali. She's only 7 years old. She's from Spain, and she helps her dad out with top tip segments on his climate-themed English lessons, from topics ranging from fast fashion to ending world hunger. And she has that never-ending energy of young kids that just leaves you feeling inspired and motivated yourself after speaking to her. I just think all of these young girls are not only the change makers of tomorrow, but really of today. And they're making ripples of change and of positive action right now, and will no doubt inspire the next generation after them to do exactly the same. So thank you so much for listening to my story, and I really appreciate you having me here.
Super, super powerful, Amy. Thanks so much for sharing. I have to say that plastic tap analogy is something that I will now never forget. And I think it brings a really, really important conversation forward. So that's a really strong analogy. Thank you for sharing. Michelle, please share your experiences and the lessons that you've learned throughout your career with the youth.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Muchelwa. I'm 16 years old, as you've already heard from the earlier introduction. And yeah, I'm really passionate about plastic pollution. And I founded Osiepe Sango, which means Friends of Lake Victoria in Luo, with my brother. And basically for the past 1.5 years, we've been working towards eradicating plastic pollution in Lake Victoria. So a little bit about me, I'm really passionate about how issues and concepts and ideas intersect. And something that I've been exploring recently is how you can actually map out plastic pollution, not just as a problem, but as something that begins from the production, the disconnect from nature and everything. So today I'm going to tell you the story about how we started our campaign and how it got to the point where it is at now, where we've actually managed to create a global platform to discuss plastic pollution in Lake Victoria and get enough people interested that right now, every weekend in Kisumu, you're going to be hearing about a cleanup on a major river or on the actual shores of the lake. So my story started a bit of a long time ago. I've grown up around the shores of the lake all my life, basically. And when I was younger, there were sand dunes, there were sandy beaches, there was clear water, there was lots and lots of fish. And there was actually this joke. There was so much fish that there was this joke that went around Kisumu that all you need to worry about is getting flour. The lake will provide the rest of the food, which basically deals with fish. So what I've noticed is as I've grown up, I've basically as I've grown up, what's happened is I've seen the lake degrade. So it started out with water getting browner, it started out and then hyacinth, and now beaches disappearing. And now what basically we're seeing is literally whole stretches of the lake and of water covered in every type of plastic you can imagine. And the first time we saw this happening was when we were walking along the shores of the beach with my brother. We were with our cousins, and we just started seeing individual bottles floating, and then we kept walking, and you start seeing more and more of it. And this was the first time I saw plastic on the beach, and I realized this is actually an issue that's here, because I had only ever heard about it on the news. So this was in 2018, and at the time all we actually did was take pictures, and then we showed our parents, and we felt really helpless because there was a lot of plastic. Imagine seeing water covered in plastic to the point it looks like plastic water. And we felt like we couldn't do anything. So fast forward to 2020, schools closed because of COVID-19. We were basically stuck at home with not much to do. You can't go outside, lockdown orders because of the pandemic and everything. So we asked our mom if instead of doing online lessons, we could actually, take this time to explore the internet. And I started doing the TEDed Art School Challenge. That's actually where the inspiration began. And then the TEDed Art School led me to the Ocean Heroes Virtual Bootcamp. So I participated in Ocean Heroes, and that was the first time I was actually exposed to this whole world of young people creating change. I got to meet people from Asia, from Africa, of course, other countries in Africa, from North America and South America. And all these people were leading all these different projects, but it was around the same issue, plastic pollution. So I remember we got to dig deep, and that's when I began to understand that what you're seeing is not just an eyesore. It connects to why you're no longer seeing as many fish, why you're no longer seeing your water being clean, why you're seeing animals and cows and stuff actually choking on plastic. It relates to, it's more than an eyesore. It's actually affecting human health and human well-being. And this is where my brother and I were actually inspired to start our campaign. So the interesting thing is, the first thing we wanted to do was start a recycling center, because we figured that the major issue has to be the lack of effective waste management, right? Like, that was the problem. But when we got on the ground and when we actually started visiting government institutions to ask about, like, what would it take to build a recycling center, we began to realize that there was actually way more to the problem. We visited the Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, and there, we told them we want to build a recycling center to deal with plastic. How do we do it? And that's when they actually told us, like, you have a great idea, but what would really help is like some data to understand, like, how much plastic are these machines going to be handling, because we actually wanted to create a whole community recycling center. It wasn't going to be small scale. We wanted to actually create something that was dealing with all the waste coming out of our community. So we went out in search of data, went from government institution to government institution, and that's when we began to, like, notice a trend. And that was the fact that there was no data on plastic pollution, as in nothing. You go to the Environmental Management Agency, they have nothing. Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, they say it's a new field, they also have nothing. And then another thing we noticed was actually the lack of awareness around the issue. And, you're talking to decision makers, and yes, they are doing something about it, but, we noticed that there was a sort of, like, superficial approach to it. Like, plastic is an eyesore, but I don't realize that it's actually more than an eyesore. It's affecting health and stuff. So at some point, we decided to collect the data ourselves. And, so we started doing beach cleanups. And what we would do is we would get the data, record it, and segregate the trash and everything. And what we noticed as we were doing this was that this process was actually incredibly tedious. So, you basically pick up the data. You pick up the plastic, you have to segregate it. Like, this is a bottle, this is a plastic wrapper, this is a plastic shoe and stuff. And then now you have to write down the brands and everything. Now, the problem is you are using paper, and paper can actually get damaged really easily. And then the other thing is that afterwards you have to put it into an online database, which could take up to 6 hours per day. So already as we were getting here, we were noticing two problems. So first of all, there was the lack of awareness. And the second thing was that there was actually not enough data on plastic pollution. So, like, a lot of people were walking blind, because you can't create proper policies, you can't create proper interventions if you don't understand where the plastic is coming from, who is using it, what brands are the most polluting, all that. So this is basically what informed the two major goals of our campaign right now, which were to create awareness amongst the people, because when you make people aware, then you're activating them to take action. When you make someone aware, you make them understand that this is what this plastic is doing, then they start thinking, what can I do? So can I avoid plastic? Can I do a cleanup? That's basically what we're trying to do. Then the other part is collecting data, because individual action can only go so far, and there's no way you're actually going to solve a problem or walk up to a government agency to propose a policy if you don't have data showing that this is what tells us that this policy is going to work. Here is the data. So far, we've actually found out, just based on the basic studies we've done, even from about 11 cleanups, we found out that most of the plastic that you find in the lake is actually single-use plastic, which means that it's not necessarily necessary. So that already allows us to break the argument of, oh yeah, plastic is necessary, we need it for hospitals and stuff. We are not finding, medical waste, we are not finding car parts. Most of what we are finding is actually single-use plastic. And yeah, so that's basically a background story based on like what we've been doing. So what we've done so far based on these two goals is we managed to break our campaign down into phases. So under awareness, we have managed to start a conversation around Kisumu, which is something really exciting. Right now, we are seeing media stations talking about plastic pollution. We are seeing decision makers beginning to care. We are seeing more cleanups and everything. And then we've also managed to empower more young people because we recently did the NAM Lolwe Youth Summit. And this was an event that united young people from around 4 continents around with the theme of basically reconnecting young people to nature. So we've noticed that around Kisumu, more people are actually starting to think, oh my gosh, I can actually do this. I can create change. And then after awareness, of course, after you've started a conversation, we're building an app right now called Ziwa Safi, and Ziwa Safi basically means clean lake in Kiswahili. So what that's going to do is it's going to use citizen science to literally map plastic pollution around Kisumu. So we're going to be able to understand what are the most polluted beaches, where is the plastic coming from, who is using the plastic, and what are the most polluted brands. So once we get this data, we're going to use that to begin driving policy recommendations and basically behavioral change on the whole spectrum. So that's basically my story, and a few tips for you guys would be like, you don't have to have it perfect from the beginning. Start your campaign, and all you need to do is actually be open-minded. Like, start your campaign, keep going, keep working, and allow it to evolve. Allow your project to evolve, because our campaign has definitely evolved. And then another thing is like, it's way more fun when you merge your talent with your campaign. So for example, what my brother has done is he really loves tech. So Ziwa Safi actually came up because he decided to merge tech with environmental conservation, and he figured we can use tech to make it more efficient. And for me, it's public speaking. So yeah, you can see that happening right now. And yeah, those are basically my tips for you guys. And thank you so much for listening to me. You can connect with me on Instagram at Michelle Muchelwa, and our Instagram account is at bring_back_lake_Victoria. I will put it in the chat. Thank you so much.
Amazing, incredible. Honestly, I don't even have the words. Michelle, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of approaching environmental issues from an intersectional perspective. That was super inspiring. Charlotte, please share your experience and the lessons that you've learned throughout your career with the youth.
Yeah, okay. Well, first off, I'm very happy to be here. And then let me share my screen because I have a little presentation. There we go. Okay, can everybody see? I'm not sure if it's working. Okay, perfect. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Switzerland, but I moved to Singapore when I was 5 years old. So I kind of grew up around the ocean. It wasn't a very clean ocean, I'd say. Singapore is a very international harbor, but I got the chance to grow up near the ocean and participate in a few activities regarding to marine conservation and plastic pollution around that. When I was young, I loved the ocean. I have a couple photos of me always being in the water with my mom and all of that. So you can see I really was like an avid swimmer. My parents like would throw me into the pool and I just, swim like a natural little baby. I mean, I wanted to be a mermaid when I was younger. I think that was a lot of young girls' dreams. So I kind of just started with being in the ocean a lot. I have a photo of me water skiing. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm crying because it was very hard for me to be able to stand up. So these are a bit of my experiences of when I was younger and how I started getting more involved with the ocean and marine conservation. I did my bubble maker at age 8, which is kind of like it's like a patty that you can do when you're 8 years old. You're only allowed to go to 8 meters, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. I got to see, I think it's called a lionfish, and I was terrified. And then I did my patty in 2015. It was my first night dive ever, but it was really amazing. I absolutely loved it. So that's kind of when I fell in love with the ocean and diving in the underwater world. And then in 2018, I got the opportunity to go on a research trip in Papua New Guinea with Dr. Mark Erdman, who works with Conservation International. And I got to see how they tag whale sharks and how they track them, how the data works, all the different tags. So here are a couple of photos of me diving with them. This is my favorite because it looks like I'm being eaten by the whale shark when I'm not. It's just a matter of perspective, but I love showing this photo to everyone. This trip was kind of the reason why I got more involved in marine conservation and decided that I wanted to study marine biology, because I kept bombarding Mark Erdman with questions about his job and what he would do. And it opened my eyes to the fact that being a marine biologist doesn't mean that you're in the ocean 24/7. It's actually, you're only in the ocean about 10% of the time, and 90% of the other time you're on land actually writing papers, getting grants and all that. But I was still, despite that fact, I was still very eager to get involved in marine conservation and to get involved in marine biology and all of that, which led me to create 60 Seconds for Ocean, which is an Instagram account that I created last year, where I interview different marine biologists, marine conservationists, and anyone who works with the ocean or who has an interest in marine conservation. So this is kind of my account. I've interviewed almost 100 people, and it's been all like really amazing. Everyone that I've talked to has given me some great advice, and it's taught me a lot about how you don't need to have this huge project or huge company or huge amounts of money to be involved to help with marine conservation. Because the question that I ask everybody is, what would your advice be to a 16 to 25-year-old young woman if they say they want to do something to contribute to marine conservation? And everyone has different answers onto how young women can get involved in marine conservation. And even if it's just little steps from reducing how much plastic you use in your daily life, or just other different small baby steps that you can do, all of these will accumulate to creating a bigger impact into how we can save our oceans and how we can save our planet. And I think that's something that not a lot of people understood, and something that I didn't really understand at the start of my project, because I thought I needed to be really famous and have a lot of influence to be able to help others, which actually, really isn't true. And I have, these are some of the people that I've interviewed, and I've been very, very lucky to interview them. And I've had amazing times talking to all of these very influential people, whether they be working directly with marine biology or marine conservation storytelling, using photographs and all of that. One of the best advices I've ever gotten was from Christina Mittermeier, who works with Sea Legacy, actually founded Sea Legacy, is that not everybody needs to be a Jacques Cousteau or a diver or a photographer. If you want to help with marine conservation, you can do it by getting a career in law, finance, communication. And it's the support system around the people that are creating change that really need helps. And I think for me, that was very eye-opening, because it was one of the first people I interviewed. And I thought you needed to work directly in marine conservation to be able to help, but it's not that. It's everyone who works around it that can help and can help make a difference. It's working with politicians who can help create policies, and working in law, whether you're an environmental law lawyer, or I don't really know all the different types of lawyers, but a lawyer who works in the environment and the ocean, all of that. And all of these people help to, support everyone who's working directly with the ocean into marine conservation. And creating my project has helped me get a lot of different opportunities. I've spoken on 2 different podcasts about my project and on how young women can help in marine conservation. So I've talked on Our Epic Ocean, which is created by Rich German, also Water Woman podcast, which is amazing. I interviewed Jill, who's the founder, and she's such an incredible woman. So I was very, very lucky to be on the podcast. It was my first ever podcast, so I was very nervous. If you listen to it, I don't know if she really cut them out, because I don't really like listening to my voice, so I didn't hear the podcast, but I might sound a little nervous, have a lot of pauses and and things like that. But it was a great opportunity to be able to speak on that, and she has a lot of amazing podcasts. I also gave a talk to an environmental class at the University of Colorado Boulder, about how you can create a project that can help others getting into conservation, whether it be on land and the ocean. And I also became an ambassador for Sea Smart School, which is based in Canada. And then, so this is my handle for Instagram. But basically, to sum it all up, I created this project to get young women involved in marine conservation, such as, me. And I kind of started it to give people advice, but I also got a lot of advice myself. And it's been an incredible experience talking to all these amazing people, and conservationists, biologists, anyone who works with the ocean. And I've truly learned a lot. And I did not think that I would learn a lot from it, but it's been truly amazing. And I'm very lucky to have had a lot of people support me and all of that. And very happy that I get to have opportunities to talk to other people about how to get involved, such as this talk today. But yeah, I think that's it for me now.
Inspiring, Charlotte. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the holistic perspective and giving that advice about, there's so many different moving parts when it comes to ocean conservation, and you don't have to be limited to one specific career or one specific area of focus. All of the moving parts support each other. I love that. I think that would be really helpful for someone who's trying to figure out where they fit in the space of ocean conservation. And because we've talked so much about being young female leaders, I mean, I have to ask, how would you describe any of the challenges that you've experienced being a female leader in this space?
Oh, I would say, honestly, I started my project last year, and I think I haven't honestly had that many issues being, a woman in like marine conservation and in STEM, because it's been such a progressive field that there has been such a big influx of women working with the ocean, that I've never felt like I was the minority or I've had a challenge to overcome, because the majority of the people that I've interviewed are all women, and they're all so inspiring, and it's inspiring me to be more inspiring and to have more of an impact on this world. And I don't really know about any challenges about, being like a leader kind of in marine conservation. And I'm very grateful that I haven't had to experience that, honestly, and I don't think I want to ever experience it, but I think I definitely will. I think it happens to everybody, but for now I've been lucky enough to not experience it.
It's great to hear from your perspective that you feel the space is becoming progressive and increasingly more progressive. Amy, Michelle, what are your thoughts on that? Have you had similar experiences or different experiences?
I don't want to interrupt Michelle if she's going to speak. I don't know if I can go first. I think that from my experience, it's not been so much being a young woman, but so much being young that's been the main challenge, because I think there's still a long way to go with people, particularly decision makers, the people with a lot of power to make urgent change on these issues. I think there's still a long way to go in being taken fully seriously by these sorts of people and being fully listened to, because I think sometimes they'll hear us, but they won't really listen to us. And I think that's a really big distinction and such an important one when we need such urgent change happening on these issues. So I think that's been the major challenge for us, and I'm sure one that a lot of other youth activists will experience. And I think it's been amazing to see how much further it's come with young people making change since, for example, we started our charity, but I think there's still a long way to go with us properly being listened to and heard in these spaces.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Amy. I've definitely experienced the same thing, because for me, actually, like whenever I'd walk into a room, especially if I was with my mom, like if we were sitting down in a decision maker's office, he'd actually look at my mom like, okay, tell me what you want to do. So they would actually get shocked when I would be the one that would start talking about the project, and they're like, oh my goodness, okay, so it's you leading the project. So yeah, there's a lot to be done in terms of like getting people to actually take young people seriously. And for me, I'll also say I've not experienced much discrimination being a woman, which I'm really thankful for. And I think that's because even in the spaces that I walk into, I always manage to find allies, because for example, we met the Director General of Kemfree recently, and what happened is once he heard about my project, like since then he's sort of been making room, because this is a person with such a high office. He basically leads like marine research around the country, but whenever we are together, he'll always make sure that I feel like I'm listened to, you know. My mom was actually joking about the fact that his every second word is, Michelle, what do you think? Michelle, this is your project. You make the decision. So I think that we actually need more people, more older people like that who recognize that I see what you're doing and I think that you deserve the space because I can see that you're experienced enough to make your own decisions. And I'm really thankful that I'm actually in a space where there are so many of those people that are just dedicated to saying like, I'll step aside and I'll give you a voice, which is really fun. Yeah.
That actually resonates a lot with me because I can identify with being taken a lot less seriously because of my age. So what would you advise young folks, like on our end, how do we prepare for that? How do we counter that? Because there's so much that could be done on everyone else's end, but we are the ones that have to be prepared to receive that. Amy, you can go first.
Thanks. I think there's a couple of things. I think firstly, it's a lot easier said than done, but I think just not losing that faith in yourself and also that belief of why you started, because ultimately a lot of us who are making changes in these spaces are doing it for reasons that are really important to us. And I think we just can't be demoralized by those attitudes because they're always going to be there. And I think it's just about overcoming them and actually proving that we need to be taken seriously, that we do have things that are worth listening to. So I think that's one really important thing. And I think the second thing is exactly as Michelle was saying, just finding allies, finding other young people, and not even young people, finding older people to support you in your action and to advise you and to offer you that support that you need. I really think that networks are so important, and you know, anyone can tell from an event like this how kind of infused you leave. And so I think really making sure that we show each other that we're not in this fight alone and that actually we're all working together towards this common goal is, I think, something that's been really important to us especially.
Yeah, and adding to that, I'd also say like your work at some point is going to show them what you can do. And this is from experience, but like most of the time people won't take you seriously as a young person because there is that conditioning. So I would encourage you to be prepared for that. And then of course, as Amy mentioned, like adult allies. But something else is that you can actually change mindsets just with the work you do, because I know that like after we organize the Namlolwe Youth Summit, even my dad doesn't look at me the same way anymore. Like immediately after he saw what we did with that, it's like I'm an adult now. I ask him for stuff and he's like, oh, do you need help with this proposal? And like it's sort of like something changed. And I think that's what happens when people see that I'm a young person, but I can do something a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old would be able to do. Because I remember there are people that have read our proposals and asked like, are you sure you're 16? Are you sure you wrote this? Like, are you sure it wasn't your mom that helped you? So that's like getting to that point is really helpful. So I'd say like keep going and keep showing with your work that like, yeah, I'm young, but I can do it just as well as you.
I love that. Being prepared to show everyone your capacity, what you're capable of. So on the same note of being prepared, let's say if you could teach all of the youth in the world one skill or one lesson, what would it be and why? Charlotte, let's start with you this time.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot now. Teaching one lesson. I think don't ever give up. Sometimes it feels like nothing's going to work out. You know, you want to start a project, you think it's not going to work out. People aren't going to enjoy it. People aren't going to be interested. People aren't going to want to be, you know, active in it. But that's what I thought when I started my project. And I think just keep going, persevere. And if your project fails, then okay, that's fine. Learn from it and create something else. You know, think about what you did wrong with your first project or whatever it is that you started, and kind of build on that for whatever, you know, you want to start next. So I think just my advice is don't give up and just, you know, keep pushing through. I know a lot of people will tell you, no, this is never going to work. Don't do it, blah, 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 blah. But don't listen to them. You know, if you really believe in something and if it's your passion, you're going to put all your effort into it, and it's going to be so much better than if you start to believe all the negative things people are saying about you and whatever it is that you're starting, your project or organizations or all of that. So I think just persevere, push through, and don't take no for an answer.
Amy, Michelle, what are your thoughts?
I think that it's really difficult to narrow it down to one, because I think one of the amazing things about, this isn't a cop-out answer, by the way, I will say one thing, but I think one of the amazing things about activism and change making is the amount of different things that it gives you, really. And I think maybe one thing from our experience really is just the power of positivity and open-mindedness. I think because environmental issues can seem really demoralizing, and especially, you know, with the amount of work that we do with really young kids, especially, is we're constantly looking at ways that we can make this something that isn't just all doom and gloom, and is actually something that we can all take really tangible action against. And I think for us and for the young people we work with, it's something really motivational to see that you can make an impact on this, and actually working with people rather than against people tends to be a much more effective way of making change and much more enjoyable. So I definitely say that's something that we've learned along the way, because I think it's easy to get trapped in sort of negativity and anger, which are of course completely, you know, understandable feelings, but for us, moving past them and actually turning that into positive change has been really important for us.
Okay, so for me, it would probably be what I like to call like hopeful curiosity, as in like basically falling in love with the world and everything around it. Because I feel like most of the time we are having issues right now in a lot of ways, because we've been around these systems for so long that to actually imagine that like this is not how it's supposed to be is really hard. So like the one skill that I would give everyone is just like curiosity. Like you literally walk out into the world and you're questioning everything around you. But then when I add in hopeful curiosity, I'm saying that like you're questioning with the goal of making it better. As in you think like, yeah, how can we make this house better? How can we make the television better? You know, and basically just stuff like that. So hopeful curiosity, because I feel like once you get curious and set your mind towards doing something, especially as a young person, like you can learn literally any skill. And I think that's the most empowering thing ever. Like as long as you're curious enough, as long as you're hopeful enough, as long as you're determined enough to make better, you can learn to code, you can learn to manage social media, you can become a PR marketer, you can literally do anything. And I think that's the coolest thing about like the Gen Z movement. You're seeing young people taking up multiple roles within organizations, and I think that's amazing.
I fully agree. I feel that the sense of empowerment of this rising generation is something I've never seen before. And that's why we have so many inspiring leaders, such as the three of you. It's really incredible to even witness. Amy, you talked about countering negativity, like when it comes towards you. So Michelle and Charlotte, I'm kind of wondering, how do you guys manage countering any pushbacks when you are proposing a new idea, proposing a new project? If I'm proposing a new initiative, how do I counter pushback?
I haven't experienced that much pushback yet, because this is like only like my first project and it's been online. So I haven't had to propose this to anyone. It's kind of just been like my thing only. Of course, I asked advice from my parents and all that, and they helped me create this idea. But with like pushback and negativity, I think I see that more on my account if I interview someone that's a little bit controversial. I interviewed Captain Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd. He's done good things, he's done bad things, and I've had people comment on that post about some of the negative things that he's done, and I try to handle these things more privately with people instead of replying directly to them on my post. And it's actually been very good, because I've had very interesting conversations with a lot of the people who commented on that interview, and a lot of things that I didn't really know that much about, you know, Sea Shepherd and Paul Watson, even though, you know, he's taking more of a forceful action for marine conservation. I still think some of the things that he is doing are things that need to be done, because some governments aren't taking, enough action to help. But I do think that what they're doing is very good. But I've had a couple of negative comments about that, and people reaching out to me in private, asking me about the interview and all of that. So I think that's kind of most of the pushback that I've gotten is with him. But I still think it was a very valuable interview to have on my page, with him being such a going a different route than most people do in marine conservation. But yeah.
Okay, so this is a good question, because this is something I'm currently like learning to deal with, like pushback especially. And there's actually something that happened really recently, and it made me so angry. So the thing is, as a young person, a lot of the time adults also tend to feel like even when you're doing projects, like they can just come out and tell you this is what you should be focusing on. So what happened is, we were at a river cleanup, we were sorting plastic, collecting data and everything. So there was this man from a zero waste organization, and I say zero waste because I don't think it's a proper he doesn't get the zero waste philosophy. So like what happened is, he came, wanted to know about our campaign, so we told him about our campaign. I told him about my campaign. Then he proceeds to tell me that, you know what, you shouldn't focus on banning plastic, because the thing is, then waste collectors will be out of a job, and waste recyclers as well. You need to focus on recycling plastic as well. So the thing that annoyed me about this is, because he wasn't actually talking from an environmental perspective or from an economic of like, people will lose jobs, let's find a way to get them jobs. He was talking from a perspective of, I want to keep making money from this. And that was really annoying. Like, I actually almost exploded. So what I learned in that moment, and what actually stopped me from exploding, is like, I sort of just like held myself back and thought to myself, like, you didn't start out knowing everything. When you started out, you also thought recycling was a solution. So I was thinking like, okay, what actually made you realize that recycling isn't a long-term solution? And I figured it was actually conversations like this, like spaces where you get to sit down and actually discuss things and track the root of a problem. So I decided that you don't always, like, how I'm dealing with pushback right now is, humans have their own perspectives and their own views, and you can't control that. But what you can do is create the space for them to get there themselves. And what I mean by getting there themselves is, like, if someone believes recycling is the solution, create safe spaces where they can actually sit down with other people, like people completely different from each other, and talk to each other and figure out, like, would recycling be a long-term solution? If we were doing this, and if we were actually doing this and trying to handle all the plastic in landfills and everything. And what happens is, when you do that, when you actually create these spaces for people to sit down, I think what's inspiring is you actually see mindsets change, as in people actually get there and realize, oh yeah, recycling won't solve this. So yeah, that's how I deal with pushback now, like, rather than yelling, because usually I get extremely frustrated when people don't get what I'm trying to do. I sort of just try to have a conversation so that they can get there themselves. And then, of course, on the other side, creating a connection to nature so that people think about the planet before they think about money, because I feel like money has been given way too much importance. So yeah, that's how I deal with it.
Some wise words from you guys. That's powerful. Thanks for sharing. Amy, do you have any additional thoughts around this? I want to make sure you have the opportunity to share anything else you were thinking.
I think they're both really amazing points, and like, I especially agree with Michelle about, just from the plastics perspective, of seeing all of those red herrings around plastic, which have been around for so long. I mean, it's the amount of work that you need to put into reversing the damage that's been done around misinformation around plastic, especially from, as she was saying, like the economic perspective, and especially the plastics industry and the corporations that are producing all this plastic, really spreading all this misinformation that's just so harmful and damaging when it comes to actually trying to drive change on this. So I completely agree with them. And I think someone said in the chat about how, I think it was Jordan, said open-mindedness, I can't speak now. Open-mindedness is such a key to activism. And I completely agree, because I think sometimes it can be so polarizing, especially with social media and these echo chambers we have. And really the only way we're going to create positive change and actually see the change that we want to see happen is if we do have these conversations and we do stay open to different perspectives. And I just think that's such an important point. So completely agree with those guys.
Super valuable takeaway. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. I love to open the floor now for Q&A. So we're just about a little over 20 minutes left. So you guys are free to raise your hand or type in your questions into the chat. You're also welcome to unmute yourselves and ask your questions for our speakers, whichever way you guys feel comfortable.
Hi, so my name's Kim, and yeah, from Vancouver, BC. So there's a bunch of issues around Canada, especially with the environment. And I was just wondering if any of you had any thoughts about petitioning, and maybe it'd be better, like from what I learned from having so many petitions and just like not really getting much, and people always asking for info or just like. Do you think it's better to just start like a project like you guys are doing? Thanks.
I mean, I'll go first if no one else wants to. I think petitions play a really important role. I think that ultimately, I think one of the keys to activism is taking your first steps. And so if a petition's the way you do that, then, you know, that's absolutely fine. It's what we did when we first started, and it's what one of the members of the club is doing. And I think, you know, they all play a really important role in making change happen. I think that sometimes the problem is they can be quite disconnected, and you tend to get a lot of people petitioning the same thing. And then there's no guarantee that your petition, for example, like in the UK, the government only needs a certain amount of petition signatures for it to be debated in Parliament. But then the amount of times that it just gets thrown out and not really discussed, or is just really discarded without proper thought is really frustrating. And I really feel for the people that put all the effort and time into making those petitions happen. So I think it's just really about finding the tools that work for you. I think if you need a petition and you really can utilize it to kind of the best it can be, like with a clear demand, and clear people being targeted through it, I think it can be really important and influential. I think it's just about getting people on board, doing it collaboratively, and really having a clear ask that you want to take away from it.
Hi, I'm kind of in the early stages of trying to start my own movement, and specifically, I've been working on the small scale of trying to help my school become less single plastic use oriented, because it especially became a huge problem after COVID started, and my school was having issues with small closed spaces in cafeteria times and lunch times. And I'm trying to move the school towards more biodegradable and environmentally safe options. And one of the biggest issues that I've run into is funding, because with this, most biodegradable options and that sort of stuff is slightly more expensive than these single-use plastic options. I don't know if any of y'all have run into similar funding issues and have any advice for how I can kind of take action against that.
Okay, first of all, hi. It's really cool to hear that you're actually working on building a movement. I think that's amazing. So when it comes to funding, I can definitely relate to that problem, because that's something that we experienced at the beginning, especially when you're running a project during COVID. You know, you'll have a lot of people saying, I'm sorry, we are sort of struggling right now and stuff. So what really helped us with our campaign and what we've been using like up until now is understanding the value of in-kind support. So basically the principle is, if you ask someone, for example, to give you money to buy biodegradable spoons, then rather than going to a company that already manufactures them or a supermarket and asking them to just give you the spoons themselves, like, which is easier? So that's basically what in-kind support is. So rather than cash support, which can sometimes like be really hard to attain, you're going to companies who already have this in stock, and you're saying like, all I need is this, all I need is this amount, and this is how it will benefit you, this is how it will benefit your brand and the environment, because companies still care about that and stuff like that. So that side, like the value of just getting stuff in kind. So look around and see if like there are companies that produce this, or just companies that sell this and might have it in stock, and then see if you can approach them about a partnership where they can provide you with some of these things in kind. And then another option for the funding part, and what has really helped us like with cash support, is look for, okay, first of all, build relationships with organizations around you and even internationally, like maintain your networks. So that like when you need funding, you can actually come up to these people and say, this is what the project I'm doing, this is what I need, can you help, or can you connect me to someone that can help? And that's something that has really helped us. And then crowdfunding, like get your family members and your school people to believe in what you're doing, so that they can actually support you with cash. Like family can be extremely helpful. I'm not even going to lie. Like when it comes to cash support, actually family and friends and just people that know other people that can help can be like extremely helpful. So yeah, that's basically my advice. And then also apply for grants. Yeah.
If I can just add, oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt Charlotte. If I can just add to that quickly as well, I think maybe it might be worth looking at perhaps some other alternatives as well, instead of, for example, biodegradable plastics, because I think if you're consuming the same quantity of plastic and you're getting obviously an alternative that's slightly more expensive, then that is going to work out at quite a large cost in the long run for the school. Whereas if you perhaps look at like deposit systems of reusable items, it might be a bit more difficult to set up with COVID, but they have been proven to be completely safe to use. Maybe looking at an alternative like that might work, because that's what my school did. And it might be a slightly larger initial cost, but it actually works out cheaper in the long run. And if you wanted to get in touch with us via email after this, we've got in contact with a local manufacturer near us who's set up deposit return schemes in universities and schools, and I can send you over some case studies on it that might be useful to help try and convince your school to get on board with it, just because I know it can be a bit more difficult if you haven't got like the data and the pricings and everything like that. So if we can be of any assistance with that as well, then please do get in touch.
I just wanted to add a little bit on Michelle's point of crowdfunding, because I created a fund. It doesn't really have to do with marine conservation, but it has to do with crowdfunding and raising funds. I started a fundraiser during the pandemic for an NGO that I've worked with, and I reached out to family members to raise funds and asked them to reach out to some of their friends and family to reach out to others. So kind of like a snowball effect. And I ended up raising a lot of money because of reaching out to just a couple people first, who then just snowballed it into reaching out to a lot of other people. So my experience with crowdfunding has been very successful. Personally, I know for some others it hasn't, but I think that's also a good thing to start if using alternatives to plastic I know is more expensive. So crowdfunding for me has been personally very good. So I think that's also a good option to do then from what like Michelle brought up. Yeah.
Shella, please unmute yourself, correct me if I mispronounce your name, and ask your question.
Thank you. It's Shilot. So my question is actually around how do you actually reject companies that are the source of the problem that you're working against, such as Coca-Cola? Because I think today, when I was at the nursery at Merensky, because I'm doing the project of planting fruit trees and setting up school gardens in rural communities, and this guy, he's actually the director of Coca-Cola in Bulugwane, at the city that I'm staying at, and they offered me a grant, and I kind of, you know, I was tempted to accept the grant, but then looking at, you know, considering the reason why I started, you know, the first the project, you know, working against plastic, which affects so many other problems, other factors in our society and every other parts of our lives. I just kind of like sort of like didn't have an approach, maybe not so rude response to say no, thank you. I don't want your funding or your grant because I'm working against the same problem that you're creating. So I kind of like wanted to ask from you, Michelle and Emmy and Charlotte, how do you actually reject companies that are actually the source of the problem from giving you such kind of offers? Because I'm sure it happens a lot, you know, companies trying to come at the back of you and your projects, trying to silence you by giving you some sort of funds or grants.
I think it's a really good question, to be honest. I think it's no right answer to it on how to say no to these sort of things. I think the first thing perhaps is to weigh up, like, for example, if you get a company like Coca-Cola or who approaches you, who is the complete binary opposite of the work that you're doing, then obviously, you know, you're going to want to say no to something like that. And to be honest, what you said about how I'm just going to say no to your funding because it goes against the messaging that I am working for, I think is perfectly the right thing to say, in my opinion, because it's polite, and actually it also shows that, you know, there's a reason why you're saying this sort of thing, and actually it might make them, you know, you never know, but it might make them go and think twice about approaching someone else about it. And I think that for us, the way that we deal with those sort of things is we have 3 pillars that we assess when we get a corporation, any corporation approaches, which are, you know, what we measure the collaboration against, which are things like impact on people, impact on planet, some really key principles that we stick to. And then if it doesn't fit one of those things, you know, if it matches 2 but not 1, we just won't go ahead with it. And I think having key principles that you can refer to and say, look, unless your collaboration meets this, this, and this, we're not going to work with you, has been really helpful for us to actually make sure that what we're doing is the right thing, but also turn someone down with the right reasons as well.
Okay, just to add to that, now the interesting thing for us is we've actually gone the complete opposite direction, where we're not receiving grants, but like we went knocking on the doors of the corporations to sort of try to get them to explain why there's plastic all over our beaches. Okay, so for some context, where we live, like Coca-Cola is literally on the shores of the lake, as in there's the industry, the company, and then a few meters, like you have the water. So the thing is, you walk that route and you will always find like Coca-Cola bottles all along the shores. So what we did actually when we first began our campaign is we said like, okay, what if we tried to talk to these corporations to understand why there's plastic all over and like their goals and everything. So what has been happening actually is corporations sort of running away, especially when they feel like you're someone serious, because a lot of the time what they like to do to local environmentalists is be like, okay, we'll give you this grant if you shut up and if you don't bully us. So we were doing the exact opposite, where we were going to like knock on their doors directly. So what I would encourage you to do is basically like just what Amy said. Of course, like if your campaign for it, okay, yeah, it's definitely based on what your campaign is focused on, because if your campaign is focused on engaging and holding polluters accountable and trying to get them to join you in trying to solve the problem, then of course, like having discussions with them and having them come out as partners, as long as it's not greenwashing, having them come out and say we want to partner with you is a good thing. But if you have a campaign, for example, where these people are not listening to you, but but they're offering you a grant to say like, we want you to keep quiet, or we want to satisfy you, then you say no. And I think like how you said it doesn't appeal to my messaging is basically correct. So yeah, but I don't know much because I've never said no to a major corporation before. Most of the time they're saying no to us because we're not exactly happy with them. So yeah, but what you said was accurate.
So Sarah, I see you have a question, but there's one more question in the chat before yours, and I don't want to lose it. We'll get to you in 1 second. So Ash is wondering, how do we capture the attention of those who were raised to believe that plastic is absolutely necessary for our society to function?
Okay, I can go first. I can go
Go.
first this time. We've been putting Amy on the spot. Anyway, that is an interesting question, and it's a lovely one because that's something that I've experienced a lot, as in meeting people that literally believe that plastic is never going to go away. Like, it's the most depressing thing to have someone actually tell you like plastic is here to stay. But basically how we've dealt with it is, again, like creating the space for conversations. Because, you know, for me as well, at the beginning, I thought I almost imagined like plastic has been here forever. So what was really interesting was when I was talking to my mom and she told me, you know, like 60 years ago, not even 60, she was telling me like, you know, that about 30 years ago when I was a kid, we would actually go to the shop with our own containers to buy stuff. And then she was telling me that in a supermarket, you'd never find a single plastic bag. We were using these papyrus baskets. Papyrus is basically an aquatic plant, and like you can literally weave it into into baskets, and they are extremely strong and they last a long time. So I'd say that if you want to deal with someone that has that perception, sometimes it helps to sort of try to start a conversation around what was the world like before plastic? What were we doing before plastic? How did we manage to survive without plastic? And then now, if they still don't get it, you can try to get them to go deeper into what do you use plastic for in the first place? And what's the cost of the use of plastic versus the effects? Because, for example, if you're looking at how much damage a single plastic bag does, and then the fact that it's only like used for 12 minutes, that's a huge discrepancy. So I'd say, again, like just starting these conversations and trying to get them to remember those are time we survived without it, and then like the cost of it is no longer something. It doesn't make sense to have a material that causes this much ecological damage and takes this much energy to produce, and then just like using it for 10 minutes and throwing it away and stuff like that. So just like starting those conversations, because then you'll get them to a point where they begin to realize not only is it possible to live without plastic, but it'll also get them to start questioning like, is it really worth it, you know? Especially if you start talking to them about the fact that these companies externalize costs. Because, for example, Coca-Cola doesn't pay for the cost of the plastic bottle. The fish in the ocean do, people do, because we now have microplastics in our system, ecosystems do. So, you know, you can ask them, actually, are you ready? If you're saying that you want plastic to be around forever, are you ready to pick up the bill? So that's basically my advice.
I completely agree with Michelle there, and kind of just to build on that, I think she's totally got it spot on. I think one of the things that we learned quite early on when we were learning about plastic was something that Emily Penn, who I mentioned in our talk, said, which was about how, you know, there's this real mismatch between plastic, the material, and what we're using it for, exactly as Michelle said. And it's kind of like, you know, you wouldn't use chocolate as a fire guard, right? So why would you use, you know, plastic for things that it was obviously not designed for in the long run, and it was obviously not going to work out? Like, you know, single-use items that we use for 5 minutes and then last for 450 years. I think that's something that's really striking, and I think it really makes you think twice about this material that's so ubiquitous in our everyday lives. And then I think the thing as well that's been, you know, has worked for us is just persistence. And showing ways to get involved as well, because I think sometimes people deny issues because they're so overwhelmed. We see it with climate change all the time. So if you can actually show that it's, this is a problem, but it's something we can address through changes. And, like with our grandparents, it's taken us like 5 years and they're finally using reusable cups. So I think really just carrying on, and you're not going to convince everyone, but actually having patience and actually talking to people through the reasons, talking people through the things they can do is just, really important as well.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah, spotlight's on you now.
Thank you. So I'm currently with the Brevard Zoo, and I'm also with Earth Echo International. And so what I've been doing is I've been trying to get people more involved in these groups. And one of the things that I actually did was I talked to my marine science teacher at my school, and I said, hey, you have all these, students, can you send the link, can you get them involved? And she did tell me some students are like, hey, I really want to get involved with this, it sounds interesting. What I've been kind of thinking is like, what I want to do is I want to start like my own beach cleanup, get like some of my friends involved and get more people involved, but I just don't know what like the right step is to do that. So that's what I was kind of just hoping you guys could like help me out. Like, what do you think is like the right like first steps in order to get involved, to get more people involved with doing the beach cleanup and to actually start the beach cleanup too?
I don't know if I misheard, but I think you said something about having maybe like a marine science club, or at least having a marine science teacher at your school, who knows students who'd like to get involved. And I think that's already the first step, is having people who want to get involved. And I think what you need to do next is maybe ask your teacher who are the students who want to get involved in helping with beach cleanups and other things relating to marine conservation. Just reach out to them and propose your idea to them and see which of them get back to you and want to help out with that. Because I had kind of a similar thing at my school where there was already a marine science club where we discussed different issues, but it was a very, very small group of people. I had about like 3,000 students at my school, and it was a very small minority of people who were interested. So what I did is just reached out to friends, and I had a younger sister who was also interested in this. So I would tell her, reach out to some of your friends, see who's interested. And I think, as I had mentioned before, the snowball effect, that just has always worked for me. Just reaching out to more people who will reach out to more people. I think that's the next step in, helping the environment and starting your project of beach cleanups.
I think
Yeah,
also
I
just
definitely agree.
sorry. Michelle, you go, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to like agree with that, because I remember the first time like we started cleanups, it started out with 2 people, just my brother and I. Then like what happened is when we started reaching out to people and saying like, look, this is what we're finding, this is the data we're picking up, people actually began to get more and more interested. And then it's also like, I think like to some extent cleanups actually grow organically. I think just building on what Charlotte said, we have to acknowledge that, because the thing is what cleanups have become around Kisumu right now, interestingly, is like this sort of like empowering networking space. Because like we'd spend the whole morning cleaning something up, then like afterwards people would be having conversations like, I found this bottle, I found this from 20 years ago. So already people are starting to talk about it. And then what was helpful is when you have so many people from different places coming together, like someone is like, what can we do about this? I can do social media, I can do videos. What if we make a drone video for our next cleanup and post it on Instagram? Those are the kind of collaborations that actually come out of cleanups. So yeah, definitely start getting people, get people that are interested, but don't worry about starting small, because these things actually grow organically, and soon enough you're actually going to find that you get multiple people. I mean, our cleanups went from 2 to 6 to 20 to 200 now at the latest one. So definitely like it grows organically. So just take the first step with like just starting actually.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly as Michelle said, actually, about how I wouldn't wait for other people to join you. Just start, because as soon as you wait for other people, you might never get started, because you never know how engaged people are going to be. And you never know, you could have 20 people from your school who are interested, or you could have one. But I think it doesn't really matter. It's just about starting straight away, because even the amount you can pick up as an individual is quite remarkable. And also, I think you mentioned you were part of some like amazing organizations. So it might be worth just reaching out to them and seeing if they have any local volunteers or kids in the area, or, even if you got approached other organizations for advice as well on growing things like that, it just might be worth finding out, because even if they're not from your school or your club, actually, there's some amazing networks that are really worth tapping into for a common goal.
That's absolutely facts. That's so true. So sadly, we're just about at time. I know that I would want to hear so much more of you guys' insights, but we all really appreciate you all taking the time to share your insights, your wisdom, so much of yourselves in giving advice to us, and moving forward to this new generation of ocean guardians and environmental protectors. So thank you so much, Michelle, Amy, Charlotte, for joining us. I want to give you guys a chance to share any last thoughts if you have any. It's okay if you don't. I want to put you on the spot again, even though I have this whole entire time.
Okay, so I could start. My one tip is, if you're starting a project or like with whatever you're doing, make sure that you're focusing on the people. And basically what I've learned in the process of doing this is, like, if you can change the mindset of just one person, it doesn't have to be 1,000 people, just one person, you're 3/4 ways to solving a problem. Because, for example, if you get someone who used to believe in plastic and think it was a perfect material to actually start thinking like, how can we have a more circular and more sustainable and more regenerative materials economy, you have gotten like halfway to solving the problem, because then they're going to tell other people who are going to tell other people, and that's how movements begin. And once you get people to start thinking like this could be better, then you've done it, because then they're going to want to take action to create that change. So definitely one thing I would say is like mindsets. You change a mindset, you're halfway through solving that problem, and you're also going to make sure that people learn lessons from the problem, and it won't occur again in a while. So
I think
Awesome. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think my last message would just be, I think don't be afraid to start, because every movement starts with one person. Ultimately, you need that first person to stand up and be brave and make a change. And it might seem scary in the face of your peers, especially. I know that's something, most of us will experience, but ultimately someone needs to stick their neck out. Someone needs to be the brave one that makes a change. And so, yeah, don't wait for someone else to do the work, because who's going to guarantee that that's actually going to happen?
Yeah, just quickly building up on what Amy said, like, don't wait for someone else to do the work. That's really, I think that's really good advice, because you'll think, oh, someone else is going to do it, I don't have to do it. But that someone else will think, oh, I don't have to do it because someone else is going to do it. And that cycle will just continue and continue and continue and continue. And in the end, no one will have done anything. So I just wanted to build up on that. And then my last point, I mentioned this earlier, but don't take no for an answer. If you think that, you've gotten and this is really what you want to do, go for it, just really do it. If it's your passion, you're going to put all your effort into it, and you're going to end up doing great. Even if you have a lot of failures, you're going to end up with, one amazing, project in the end, and you're going to end up, being successful. Whether you reach hundreds of people, or if you reach only 3 people, that's still, change, and that's still getting other people involved. And so, yeah.
Thank you. I know I'm walking away feeling super inspired and motivated and just like overall pumped. I just feel so refreshed. So really appreciate you guys, Michelle, Amy, Charlotte, for taking the time again. Thank you guys for joining us, for being such a super engaged and excited like audience members, I guess I could say. Our next virtual talk will be held in the last week of October, so please stay tuned for more information. I hope to see you guys again soon. And please make sure to follow us on Instagram, join us on WhatsApp, and apply to our internship program, wink, wink. So thank you guys again for joining us. I hope you guys have a great rest of evening, day, wherever you are in the world.